some, and then let's see, some important grad slam deadlines and dates. The first one being this Friday, January 27th, is registration deadline for the competition. So if you haven't already done so, and I believe some of you already have, please register for the competition. And the link Vanya just dropped in the chat. So if anything, this is a low stakes step for the competition. Don't preclude yourself from competing by not registering. You must absolutely register to go through the entire process. So at least take that first step. It's the least stressful out of all of the steps. So at least register yourself. And then next after that is the video submission deadline for the preliminary round. So that's Monday, February 6th. And if you register, attend a small group coaching session, which starts next week, and that's, to attend a small group coaching session, you must be registered. And then submit a video on the 6th, then you've entered the preliminary round. Okay, so you must attend small group coaching session to enter the preliminary round. And then from the preliminary round, we will select the top 20 students to compete in-person semifinal rounds on Thursday, March 2nd. And then from the semifinal rounds, we will select the top 10 to compete in the final competition, which will be held on Tuesday, March 14th. And the final competition will be at the California Nanosystems Institute here on campus. And going back to the semifinals, those will be held at the Young Research Library main conference room. And then our campus champion will go on to compete in the UC-wide competition, which will be held in May. The date for that has not been released yet, but that will happen in May. So those are the most important dates. And Vanya has again dropped the link to the website where you can find all of the information, including the prizes for this year's competition. So first place gets $5,000. Second place gets $3,000. Third place is $2,000. We have an audience choice winner who will receive $1,000. And then there are further details about what the rest of the finalists will receive if they don't place, as well as what semifinalists who don't move on to the final round will receive. And if you enter the preliminary round, you will receive a $50 gift card just for participating in that round. So just a few things to note. And if you have any questions, you can always email us at gdevents@grad.ucla.edu. We will drop that in the chat as well. And without further ado, I would like to hand off the mic to David Fuller, who is our facilitator for today.
Great. Thank you, Ivy. Good morning or afternoon to everyone. I'm still in morning mode, which is kind of how I live my life. I'm going to show my slides here. And just really want to welcome you. And I facilitate workshops kind of exaggerating all day long every day, and I love it when I can see the faces of the people I'm working with. So if you have cameras and don't mind turning them on, I absolutely welcome that. I find it a better experience as a facilitator, and I know from participant feedback that a lot of participants enjoy it a lot more when they can see the faces of the people they're in a workshop with. So thank you for those of you who I see some faces coming on, so I appreciate that. Today we're going to look at some of the basics of resonating with an audience when giving a presentation, right? Which is what you're here for. And when we're presenting in any kind of context, we often know a lot about what the information is that we're going to share with others. That's the easy part. Knowing the stuff is the easy part. Sharing that information in a way that people will resonate with, in a way that they'll be interested in and learn from, that's something else. That's what we're talking about. There's a lot to being a good presenter, as I'm sure you probably know. And I would imagine even within this group here, as I look at the screen, there are a wide variety of skill sets in presentation, experience in presentation. So I just want to take this time that we have together to focus in on two key areas that can have a really meaningful impact for you in terms of presenting and resonating with an audience. Some of the information may be new to you, some of it may be old hat, but we'll cover what we can in this small nutshell. First, I'll tell you just a quick little bit about myself. I have been with UCLA for just over 3 years. I'm with Campus Human Resources, Learning and Organizational Development. 3.5 years here, but I've been in training for 20 some odd years across higher ed, healthcare, social services, finance, even worked for computer startups, the very stereotypical kind with duct tape holding the Wi-Fi hotspots up to posts in the middle of an empty room with IKEA tables, and 2 years later, celebrating drinking Cristal at corporate parties in the new $1 million workspace. And I'll tell you, across all of that, the principles I'm going to share with you are the same. So it doesn't matter who your audience is, what their background is, these principles I'm going to share with you remain consistent. So the two main things we're going to focus on, one is how audiences learn, and the second is what you can do to get your message received well. Just a couple of tips there. These are big picture concepts, but they're all things that having a little bit of knowledge about can make a big difference. And they're things I wish I had known more about, or even known about earlier on in my career. While there is a high probability you're here because of the upcoming Grad Slam, the reality is these principles also will serve you well the rest of your life, because presentations are ubiquitous. We spend our life giving presentations in one way or another, maybe not professionally in our jobs, but even casually sharing information. It's true in both a blue collar and a white collar world. We think about presentations in a white collar space pretty easily. It's PowerPoint slides, that kind of thing. But even in a blue collar world, like I think about my car mechanic. I love the garage I go to. And I love the garage I go to because they explain things to me in clear language. And they explain to me why I need to care about what's needing to be fixed. They'll say, this is the problem. And for some people, if they were driving a lot each day, we would have them fix it right away. I know you work from home. You don't drive very much otherwise. So you could wait 3 to 6 months, right? That's presenting information in a way that an audience member, me, and the shop can relate to. So these are the kinds of things that we're thinking about today. Whatever your current or future career paths are, this information can be helpful to you. Personal life too. So let's start with how you can refine your presentations to take advantage of how adults approach learning. And I specifically talk about this in terms of adults, because the reality is most of what most of us know about how people learn comes from how we ourselves learned in school, especially a K through 12 environment, but a lot of this still applies in a college environment. But there are some distinctions between how kids learn, pedagogy, and how adults learn, andragogy, two different sciences. And there are differences between the two, yet most of what we know is just the pedagogy side, right? The how we ourselves were brought up being taught. So we're going to look at, a couple of elements about how adults learn, and we'll talk about how you can use that information within your own presentations to help them resonate. So here's what we know. One key thing in adult learning theory is that adults are independent. We're independent. Our self-concept is based on independence rather than dependence. The day-to-day elements of our lives aren't controlled by parents and teachers. In our adult working lives, we are independent and making our own choices, right? So usually we don't have to sit somewhere and pay attention to learn because someone is telling us it's required. We have agency over our lives and learning. So what would you do with that as a presenter is that you develop a need to know feeling in your audience about what you're going to share. right? You give people a view of the top of the mountain and why they want to climb up there with you, right? That top of the mountain being the heart of what you're sharing. This makes the content immediately relevant to your audience, and it helps answer the question for your audience members, what's in it for me, right? Because they're sitting there watching you present thinking, what's in it for me? Make the case for the value of the content you're going to be presenting and how they can use it in their lives. As I mentioned, when we're in a K-12 environment and even a little bit beyond, we're there to learn whatever is served up to us. And we're not really giving up anything else to be there because we don't have anywhere else to be, right? That's generally the case in the K-12 world. In our adult world, we are trading off, giving up doing something else for this learning moment that we're sitting in right now. So most of us need to believe that what we're hearing as an audience member is going to be relevant for us before we commit to paying attention to it or really vesting ourselves in it. Too many presenters just jump right into their topic without making the case for why an audience member should pay attention. And it's a great way to turn your audience off right away, right? It's a great way to just leave them behind. Another side to this, another element of this adult learning theory is that we adults are goal-oriented, right? We're goal-oriented. If I'm going to spend time learning X, then I want to get Y out of it as a result, which brings us to this next tip, which is make your content of your presentation, or at least part of the content, problem-centered. This is similar to making it relevant, but what we're keying into here is encouraging your audience to use their problem-solving skills to engage with your content. If you make your presentation or even just a part of it problem-centered, this can go a long way to helping people reinforce for them how they can achieve a goal by learning what you have to teach them. For example, let's say you're giving a presentation on previously lost sonnets by Shakespeare that you were able to uncover, okay? Rather than just giving a presentation of, here are new sonnets written by Shakespeare that I was able to uncover, okay, which may or may not be engaging. To make it problem-centered, what you could do is think about key decision points in your research, and then spend some time walking your audience through those decision points and asking them what decision they would have made at each key step, or at one key step, or two key steps. In the process, sharing what your results were, but engaging their problem-solving skills along with you while they absorb the information. They'll be fascinated then to hear, okay, I know what I would have done. What did that person do? And what did they learn as a result? So here's an instance where you can use an approach of imagine if you will, right? Let's say your presentation is on a new way to test a disease, test for a disease behind a particular kind of hearing loss in children. Okay, maybe that's what your grad project has been on. And your test costs 1/10 of what the next best test on the market does, right? So an imagine if you will kind of presentation then looks like, making it problem-centered for your audience, looks like this. Imagine you're the head of pediatrics at a major children's hospital with budget cuts happening left and right. Your program on hearing loss detection is world-renowned, but the board is looking at cutting it for cost-saving measures. You basically have 3 choices in front of you. And then you list the choices, one of them being this new test that was part of your graduate research, right? That's making it problem-centered. That's drawing in the audience member to try and figure out what a good approach forward would be. Another thing that happens often with attendees of presentations, which is why we really want to struggle and focus on this engagement element, is that a lot of times as attendees, we just revert back to passive learner days, those K through 12 days, where maybe we pay attention, maybe we don't. Don't let that be the case. Empower your audience to engage with your content, to explore that learning, to solve things for themselves with your help in the presentation. Lead them toward inquiry, right? Set up ways for them to want to learn more. You could mention related topics or authors of related papers and books. Maybe offer web links to case studies. And you don't have to do it in the moment. Maybe you can give them a resource where they can find it later or send something out later. And ask questions along the way, even if you don't have time to get answers from the audience for them. And I know in the 3 minutes that Grad Slam presentations have, there really isn't time to ask questions and invite answers. But inviting answers isn't the key to this. Asking the questions is, right? Ask them to ponder the questions to themselves. Now, depending on how far you are or aren't in your Grad Slam presentation writing so far, applying these couple of principles that I've just shared with you might not need a total overhaul, right? You might just need to tweak 1 or 2 little moments in the presentation. And that's what I'd like to give you an opportunity to take a stab at right now. What I want you to do is I'm going to give you 60 seconds. And I'd like to think of your own Grad Slam topic, your own presentation, if you've started to create it. And I want you in these 60 seconds to jot down how you could make at least one element of your presentation problem-centered, okay? And then I'll have you go into small groups, trios, or maybe 4 to a group to share your ideas with each other. But 60 seconds right now to just think, how can I make one element of my presentation, even just one element, how can I make it problem-centered? Okay, so here's 60 seconds. I'm going to time it. On your mark, get set, and go. And then we'll put you into breakout groups. Okay, got about 30 seconds left. And 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so now we'll put you into breakout groups. I'll give you 5 minutes. And what I'd like you to do is just each person share 20, 30 seconds on here's what my presentation is on, and here's how I can make one element of it problem-centered. Now, here's the fun part. If within your trio, like if you have no idea what you could do, ask your colleagues, right? See if they've got an idea. This is good brain sharing time as well. We're not in competition yet. This is a time to help each other learn and grow. Okay, so Christopher, you opening the breakout groups, or is that something I'm doing? Great. Okay, so thank you for that. So we'll put you in your breakout groups, and we'll have you back here in 5 minutes. Right. Welcome back. Hope you shared some good ideas. Hope you had some good ideas. Let's now talk about the next thing that I'd like you to know about how we adults approach learning. And that is that we come with experience. We've been around the block a time or two. That experience is valuable to us. And in a lot of cases, it makes up our identity, right? We identify ourselves with that experience as part of who we are. And leveraging your audience's past experiences, whenever possible, is another thing that you can do to help your audience resonate more with your presentation. You want to ask yourself, how can, depending on whatever your topic is, this is topic agnostic, how can X, whatever your topic is, apply in their own life, right? How can knowing X make a difference in something from their past? How could it have made a difference? How could it make a difference in something coming up for them? Because their experience is part of their self-identity, the more they can connect that with your content, the better. Help them also see how their experience might negatively impact their understanding of your content, This is a big one. What preconceptions might they have that impact how they resonate with what you have to share? What beliefs do they have that might go against what you have to share? If we can catch people in a contradiction between what they already think to be true and what reality is, that's a great way to engage them in a presentation. Each of us brings our own world of experience to the table. We want presenters to know that we've got it and cater to it, right? And all too often, presenters fail at that. They forget that we've been around the block a time or two. So when you can, invite that experience, involve that experience that your audience members have in your presentation. Ask them how they would use what you're presenting in their day-to-day world. And again, you can ask the question even when you don't have time for people to answer it, right? Just asking the question engages them in your content. So now let's repeat this process of applying new knowledge to your own presentations by looking at how you can connect your audience's own experience to what your grad slam presentation will be about. This can be challenging in a general audience, right? Because a general audience, we don't know what they know. They might have world experiences and self-identities completely different than the topic that we're talking about. But again, an imagine, if you will, approach can be helpful here. So I'm going to give you 60 more seconds. I want you to think about your topic, and I want you to think about how you might be able to invite your audience to bring something of their own experience into what you're presenting. Right? What might they be able to draw on? So 60 seconds to think about that, and then I'll put you back into breakout groups. We'll do 4 minutes for this next one. We'll speed up the process a little bit. So here's 60 seconds to think on that. How can you invite your audience to bring something of their own experience into what you're presenting? 60 seconds on your mark, get set, go. About 15 seconds left. All right. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Put you back into breakout groups. You'll have 4 minutes this time around. Just quickly share, here's something I think I can do to help invite my audience members to bring their own experience into what I'm talking about. Okay, and we'll call you back in 4 minutes. The others will be joining you in about 10 seconds. Welcome back. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, here comes everyone else. Okay, welcome back. Now, the last concept in this adult learning theory world that I want to share with you is that most of the time, when we go out to learn something new, it's not just for the joy of learning as adults. Most of the time, we want to learn something to do something with it now, right? So when we want to engage an audience, we help connect them to how they might be able to use what we're sharing with them right now. It's funny how this really does play out a lot. I was talking with someone a couple of years ago who said they were learning Italian. I'm like, oh, why are you learning Italian? And his answer was, oh, just for fun. I'm like, you don't ever plan to use it? Well, no, my wife and I have a trip to Italy planned for 2 years from now, and I wanted to just kind of be able to get us around. Okay, well, that's the now is 2 years from now, but there's definitely a plan for that learning, right? Grad school is no different, right? Very few people are in grad school just to learn what there is to learn, and then they're going to go off and do something completely different, right? That just doesn't really hardly ever happen. We want to be able to apply our learning to something relatively soon. Now, what does that look like in a presentation? That can be a lot easier when the presentation isn't for something like Grad Slam, right? When you have a general audience, as Grad Slam audiences are, and you're dealing with research that you've been doing these last however many years on something maybe probably random, esoteric, not really relevant to what this audience is talking about, it can be challenging, no doubt. You could be cheeky and say something like, I'm going to make this relevant to you now on why you want to vote for me as the winning presentation, but that's not really kind of applicable. It doesn't work. Where you can help the person then is to invite them to put themselves in the shoes of someone who can use this information right now. Invite them to think of a situation where what you're sharing with them could help. I touched on this earlier, but it really is important to think of who your audience is, and they're asking the question, what's in it for me, right? So even just inviting them to maybe be the first among everyone they know to know this information and that they can share it with someone, right? Your research is new. You've got novel information no one has heard before. Can't you just wait to get out there at a cocktail party and drop this on? Do we still have cocktail parties? But to just drop that on someone, this thing that I heard in this presentation. So what can I do with this information right now? Invite your learners to engage in that. For more information on these concepts, these three main concepts I just shared with you, you can Google adult learning theory. You'll come up with a lot of information, much, much more than I've shared with you. And I gave you a small and shallow pool. The pool of adult learning theory knowledge is wide and deep. These were just a couple of concepts to help get you going on it. Now, as we wrap up here in the last few minutes, I want to share with you this next idea, this area for you to think about. Hand in hand with adult learning theory for engaging an audience, helping information resonate with them, helping them learn it, is the idea of learning styles, ways to frame information to serve it up. Show of hands, or you can do a thumbs up emoji if you don't have your camera on. Are there any cooks in the room here? Anybody who does cooking, likes cooking? Great. I see an assortment here. So this is especially for the cooks, but everyone will be able to relate. Let's say you make a wonderful, rich soup that's been on the stove all day long. You've spent hours and hours crafting the flavors in this, and you're going to serve it to your guests at dinner. What are the ways you could serve the soup? Could you serve it out of a tureen? Yeah. Could you serve it off of a plate? Sure, not as effective, but you could. You could serve it out of a pitcher. Could you sop it up with a sponge and squeeze a portion out into each person's bowl? Yes, yes, definitely. These are ways you can serve soup. However, some of the ways do better at serving the soup than other ways. That's what I want you to think about in terms of learning styles. Some of the options for learning styles are better than others. Here are the basics, and you all probably know the basics, but I'll cover them just the case. just in case. When we're talking about learning styles, we most frequently mean the three things you see on the screen here. Visual learning, which is when you learn something by seeing it or reading it. Auditory learning, when you learn something by hearing it. And kinesthetic learning, when you learn something by touching it or when there's motion involved. Random side note on finding graphics for presentations. I did the clip art search. This middle graphic came up for the ear. I thought I've seen that ear before. I had to think about it, and then I realized, oh, is it a Vulcan ear? It might be a Vulcan ear. No, perhaps it's an elven ear. In any case, it's an ear. Some things you put in slides for yourself, some things you should just leave behind. That was one of those moments. Okay, so 3 learning styles. One of the things we commonly think about when we think about learning styles is crafting information to meet the learning styles of our individual audience members. It can be a nightmare to think about that, and I don't want you to think about that. Here's why I don't want you to think about that. It's kind of a myth. Over the last decade or so, a little bit more than that, actually, there's been a lot of research done, a lot of study, a lot of review of the research on how learning styles help in learning. And one of the things that has come up, much to the surprise of most people, is we as individuals don't have preferred learning styles in which we learn best. Most of us have preferred learning styles where I think I learn best in this, or I think I learn best that way. But the reality is the studies don't really bear that out. I'll leave that to the academics to debate. What doesn't have debate these days is the idea that certain subjects do lend themselves best to certain learning styles. For example, let's say you have to teach geometry. If I had to teach you about rectangles and cubes and angles of a polygon, how effectively could I do that if I couldn't show you these things or let you hold models of them? All right. Could you learn geometry if you had to learn it audio only? Right? You could, but it would be much tougher, right? If I had to teach you a song, but I couldn't sing it to you, I couldn't play it for you, I only had to teach you the song using pictures. Could that be done effectively? Maybe, but much more effective if I use the auditory learning style, right? So for your upcoming presentation, for all presentations really, a good approach is to cover the learning style bases as best fits your topic. I'm not saying create learning style information across all 3 for everything in your presentations. Just ask yourself, of the information I'm sharing, is there a learning style that might deliver that information best, that might be a soup tureen instead of a sponge squeezed out onto a plate? If you have in your graduate work, if you've discovered a new math equation, use the visual learning style to share it, right? Visual works really well there. Did you discover a new whale song, right? If that's the case or something similar, use the auditory learning style to serve that up to your audience. Did you create a new fabric, right? Pass a sample of the fabric around if you're in an in-person, or show it, right? Now we're talking visual there, but you can imagine people, you can invite people to imagine what it feels like. You can talk about the texture, invite them to have that kinesthetic experience with the thing that you have created. Feel free to explore that, right? Think about, and there might not just be one thing. All 3 might serve it well. You might have one style in the lead with a couple supporting it. But ask yourself that about your presentation. What can serve my audience best in terms of how I serve them this information that I'm going to share in my presentation? All right, so that's learning styles, which brings us to the end of the content that I have for you. But I want to, and it's 10 till it's perfect, I want to open the gates if there are any questions that you have for me on the learning styles, on the adult learning theory, any of the information that I have shared so far. What questions do you have that I can answer for you?
I had a question.
Please.
So in the adult theory, you mentioned that people come with experience, and you said that if we catch people with a contradiction, then we have them interested more in a slide. So can you give an example of a situation where we could do that?
Yeah, sure. So, and I'm going to get this wrong. So I'm making up an example here based on just diet, because diet is something we're always thinking about. And I see examples like this come up pretty regularly. And you might ask someone, which has more sugar? This nutritious granola bar from Healthy Nature's Farms, or this can of Coca-Cola, right? Maybe that's the start of the presentation. And everyone says, oh, it's got to be the can of Coca-Cola. But then you expose to them that, no, actually, the can of Coke has 34 grams of sugar. This granola bar from Happy Nature Farms has 38 grams of sugar. And that's where my research into how we market nutrition exposed blah, 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 right? That I've caught people in something that they assume isn't going to be the case, right? It might be, how many planets are there? Right, well, there are 9. I learned there are 9 in school. No, there are really 8 because Pluto's too small. And actually, did you know that the International Planetary Society just said that Mars is too big to be a planet? They now have this new thing that they're calling it, which I just totally made up right now, and none of that's happening. But that's the idea. How can we catch people in what they think they know, but turns out they actually don't know the reality? Maybe that happened to you with learning styles. Right? If there was anyone who sat there thinking, wait, no, I'm pretty sure I learn best with auditory learning. I've caught you in a contradiction, right? I've told you the research says what you feel to be true isn't true, right? Now, we just can never tell what's going to happen there, but it's always good to engage an audience that way. Well, I'm going to qualify that. It can be good to engage an audience that way. One of the things you don't want to do is be so contrarian that you turn an audience off, right? You want to be able to find a way to invite the audience in with their preconceptions in hand that they're allowed to keep for a little while until you show them why that information is actually not correct. Does that help?
Yes, helps a lot. Thank you.
Good. You're very welcome. What other questions are there? All right. Well, if there are none, I always like to invite folks, if you want to reach out with questions after the fact. I'm someone who will leave a workshop and about an hour later go, oh, I should have asked this. Feel free to reach out to me. My email address is dfuller, David Fuller, like on the screen, dfuller@chr.ucla.edu, stands for Campus Human Resources. So dfuller@chr.ucla.edu. Happy to answer whatever questions you might have. And feel free just even to, thank you, Ivy, for putting that in. I appreciate that. Feel free to just drop a note, even if there's a success story that you have with putting any of this in place. If there's a failure story you have putting this in place, I love to hear those too. I also, before we wrap up, and I think Christopher's going to, or someone's going to put it in the chat, there's a link to an evaluation for this session. Ivy and the whole team from the Division of Graduate Ed would love to have your feedback on this session and any others you've attended, or that I understand there's one left that you might be attending. So good luck in your presentations. Congratulations on the work you've been doing in your programs. I think Grad Slam is such a fantastic way to celebrate that, share it with others, if for no other reason than it helps you, the process helps you just kind of synthesize and refine down what you've been doing in a way that can help you for years to come in terms of talking about this great work you've been doing. So congratulations, all of that. And I wish you all well. And I'll toss it back to Ivy.
Thank you, David. Again, if you have time, please fill out the workshop evaluation for us. We do appreciate the feedback. And if you have any questions, again, please don't hesitate to contact us at our GD events email, and we will try to get back to you as quickly as we can. But otherwise, we do have one more workshop tomorrow, and that one is specifically about your PowerPoint component for the presentation. So it's finesse your slide with Francesca tomorrow. So if you're not registered already, please consider doing so. And otherwise, yeah, like I said, if you have any other questions, please feel free to contact us. Thank you again for coming today. And we look forward to seeing hopefully your videos come February 6th and seeing you in small group sessions next week. So otherwise, enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. Thank you, everyone.
Take care all.